The world in general is a much better place than it was yesterday. There is less war, people are healthier, and poverty is shrinking. Though, it is hardly as if the world we live in is some sort of monument to freedom and prosperity. Fighting the hurdles of today in search of a better tomorrow is part of the human experience. These hurdles, however, can be quite massive in scale, namely authoritarian governments and multinational corporations. How is it possible to overcome these sorts of institutions to make a better future? Studio Trigger's breakout series Kill La Kill made a huge splash on the anime scene when it first started airing back in October of 2013. While the scope of Kill La Kill's narrative hits on many highly compelling topics and themes, its depiction of the interwoven mesh of government and corporations is perhaps the most interesting aspect of its world. Its conception of these concepts goes so extreme as to represent the idea via worldwide human subjugation. But even with Trigger's proclivity for exaggerated storytelling, it goes beyond saying that the show's story tells us the dangers of authoritarianism and corporatism in our society in a highly exciting fashion. Let us explore just what Kill La Kill has to say about these hurdles, because Kill La Kill is much more serious than its outfit would suggest. The crux of this corporate authoritarian system begins and ends with Onaji Academy. We learn very early on just how Onaji operates, and the power and influence the school and its council have regarding the fictional city of the same name. The setting is visualized by a massive dense layout of slums climbing a hill, with the decadent and domineering academy sitting atop its peak. This is obviously a symbol for society and how it functions. Onaji Academy is a very top-heavy operation, so much so that the student council president, Kiryuin Satsuki, is effectively the end of the line when it comes to decision-making in the city and the academy. Satsuki and her authoritarian outfit administer power by distributing gokuseifuku, a sort of supersuit, to those loyal and obedient to the student council. Gokuseifuku offers the wearer a plethora of body-enhancing characteristics, like super strength for example. Immediately, we see Kill La Kill draw a parallel to the real world. The power pyramid that Satsuki and her student council operate very much mirrors many real-world societal mechanisms for influence. Those individuals with power and influence within the system enjoy lavish lives and many resources. Those who don't, and it's not as if the Onaji system is designed to allow people to climb the ladder easily or even considers multiple socioeconomic variables. It's a hard, cruel, and unforgiving machine. Similarly, institutional oppression is a reality in our world at many levels. Income inequality and implicit forms of discrimination in work and school spring to mind. On the extreme end though, we can look to the Arab populace in Israel who are widely regarded as second-class citizens in the eyes of the Israeli system and even within broader society. In China, we see that its populace are subject to discrimination based on a social credit system, and this is to say nothing of the Uyghur demographic. You can be banned from high-end education and well-paying jobs for infractions such as buying too many video games or smoking, things that you most certainly should have the agency to do regardless of what the state feels is good for you. The difference between our world and that of the show is that oppression in Kill La Kill is a hammer that hits everyone, and everyone sort of accepts this, whereas in our world, it's a much more complex, interconnected weave of multiple factors. The end result tends to be more or less the same. With that said, Kill La Kill certainly doesn't feel hopeless about institutionalized oppression. Within the beginning of Kill La Kill, we find that standing in opposition to Onaji is a brazen young girl, Mato Iruko. She proudly stands in the face of Kiryuin's operation, both of her own conviction and because she gains a gokuseifuku of her own. A kamui, in fact, the highest caliber of seifuku. However, this rebellious streak comes to mean a lot more within the grander narrative that Kill La Kill presents, as Onaji Academy is a lot more than a dictatorship. Indeed, Satsuki's Onaji operation is just an arm of a bigger scheme, and this is where the narrative begins to shift from good old-fashioned fascism to a much more corporate lens. Satsuki's mother, Kirin Dragyo, runs the fashion empire known as Revox. Dragyo's characterization immediately shifts the narrative. Satsuki's unwavering obedience to this unmatriarchal figure really solidifies the sort of power and influence Dragyo holds. We learn that Revox holds absurd amounts of control, having 90% share of the clothing market. Now Revox clothing contains what are known as life fibers, the same material that provides the gokuseifuku and kamui their immense power. The life fibers, in fact, are actually an alien race looking to subjugate and enslave humanity for the resources they can provide. Dragyo is infatuated with the prospect of human subjugation and obtaining even more power and control. As such, she helps the life fiber alien race to attach itself en masse to humans worldwide via Revox clothing in order to initiate their instrumentality. While the subjugation of the human race doesn't outwardly appear to be the goal of corporations in our world, there's definitely something to be said about the sort of opportunistic nature of multinationals as they exist in reality. You can look to a real-world fashion brand, Joe Fresh. The brand was faced with massive controversy and backlash back in 2013 due to a production operation based in a Bengali factory collapsing, killing a reported 1,127 workers and injuring thousands more. The massive death toll was only really half the reason for the outrage, as it was also reported that inspections of the factory were questionable and even cited concerns as to the structural integrity of the facility. While human subjugation and abominable working conditions leading to the deaths of hundreds are two different concepts, the connection is obvious. Corporations don't care as to the well-being of individuals. They care about their motives, mostly that of the bottom line. Just as Ragyo only cares for the enslavement of the world, corporations only care for the money they exact from their operation. Tracing back to Onaji, it's a particularly intentional choice within the narrative that Onaji Academy is one arm of Revox. If we take Onaji Academy to be a representation of real-world government, educational, and other public institutions, the greater reality of Kill la Kill's world is that all of these bodies are controlled either directly or indirectly by corporations, Revox really. I think that this particular detail is incredibly valuable, as it not only allows Revox to stand as a well-defined example of corporate encroachment, but it also ties in well with another one of Kill la Kill's standout themes, fascism. This is a particularly important theme in Kill la Kill, and I highly recommend that you read this write-up on Who Cares About Anime. Within the real world, there is certainly a relation of different organizations and institutions within society. For example, the computers you use at public school are most certainly purchased from a corporate entity. It would be inordinately expensive for any government to develop operating systems technology, computer processors, storage media, and networking infrastructure completely from scratch. And as such, public schools will buy these sorts of resources from companies, Google, Microsoft, Apple, etc. But to suggest that something like a public school is controlled by a corporation in absolute is quite the stretch. Even still, there is a level of corporate overlap in the political sphere. You need not look further than the FCC chairman himself, Ajit Pai. Aside from generally being an unlikable character, Ajit Pai is not free from corporate influence. While a short stint, Pai worked as legal counsel for Verizon Communications in the early 2000s. Looking further than that, the chairman's proposals don't appear to be in the best interests of consumers. Much of his work at the FCC has been regarded as anti-consumer, mostly as it pertains to net neutrality. Pai's legislation has regressed consumer protections in telecom, allowing service providers the opportunity to discriminate network traffic and charge more or less based on that traffic. Moreover, corporate lobbying presents itself as a pretty obvious example of corporate interference within government. For example, many of the same ISPs lobbied against consumer protections regarding data collection that the Obama administration attempted to instate, which would later be retracted by the Trump administration, again via Pai. In Kill la Kill, however, the intentions of our proverbial chairman, Satsuki, are quite different. While she operates under the guise of being a Revox puppet, she is secretly setting the stage for the downfall of Revox, hoping to save the world from her mother's plans of slavery and subjugation. On the other hand, Ajit Pai's motivations appear much more insincere. Finally, we need to understand what Kill la Kill thinks we should do about all of this. It's no use pointing out a problem if you don't do anything to address it. This is where things get very metaphorical. Within the show, we see what can be best described as the opposite of Marxist theory play out on screen, wherein Revox, Ragyo essentially, proliferates beyond comprehension and is defeated at her peak, creating a power vacuum. So by the end of the show, it leaves Kill la Kill's world with a sort of primitive socialism, as all the world's resources are in the hands of a naked humanity. The issue is that a violent battle royale of people versus governments and corporations is not exactly the most pragmatic way of going about things, nor is it particularly peaceful. Multinational corporations are multinational, as it were, and so pulling this off is really out of this world. The issue is further complicated as philosophies and feelings regarding corporations is a really regional thing. For example, the European Union suggests that large social media sites should provide users the option to view the information that the corporation has collected about them, whereas that sort of regulation isn't required in North America, for example, which is sort of a non-issue as online platforms largely administer regulations worldwide regardless. Take a look at the Pewdiepie versus T-Series thing. T-Series has somewhat successfully tied their brand to a sense of nationalism, even further muddying the waters. So taming the money-hungry corporate world won't give us the option of a one-size-fits-all solution. Even the nature of corporation differs from country to country. For these reasons and many, many more, it is rather difficult to disassemble this mess of institutions in society and construct something newer and better from its rubble. So then, it's best to look at Kill la Kill's telling of events as a worst-case scenario, warning not to stand still in this fight for control of society. Coming to a close, we've come to understand one of Kill la Kill's standout features, its depiction of corporatism and authoritarianism in society. It's one of the most relevant pictures to paint, not only for its immediate connection to the real world, but also for the way our protagonists go about overcoming these obstacles. And ignoring the show when it contains such pertinent content is doing the show a disservice. Whether it be a dictatorial figurehead, institutional oppression, or the corporate world overtaking society for control of the masses, nothing gets in the way of searching for a better tomorrow. We're all searching for our glittery life. It's not easy to upheave the world from the roots up, but it's certainly not worth it to calcify watching the world turn into a lifeless husk. We have to push forward for the sake of ourselves and everyone else, and try to look stylish while doing it. Right guys, if you enjoyed me saying corporation bad ooga booga for like 10 minutes, then go ahead and smash that like button. I'd ask you to subscribe really, but I don't necessarily know if I'm gonna continue to just produce these sort of long analytical style videos. I might try something new. My channel is young. I'm young. I gotta try out some shit. You know what I'm saying? Like methane. But I mean, if you want to stick around, you know, you can always subscribe. It means a lot to me. Go ahead and share this video with your friends. Maybe they can stop a corporation or protest the government. I don't fucking know, man. Have a nice day, everybody. Have fun.